The HOA president cornered my daughter at the bus stop and tried to charge a non-resident fee. And her reason? She said that bus access is a neighborhood privilege. Little did she know I'm the chief of police, and that privilege ended with handcuffs. But let me start at the beginning. I'm Lucas Morris, 61, chief of police. I like quiet. My knees like louder. It's a title that sounds a lot more important than it is. Mostly my job involves settling disputes over property lines, convincing teenagers that stop signs are not merely suggestions, and dealing with the occasional raccoon that gets mistaken for a burglar. I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. All I want now is to drink my coffee while it's still hot. Watch my 9-year-old daughter, Lucy, grow up and listen to my wife, Laura. Tell me I'm wrong. About which actor was in that movie from the 80s. I crave peace. I crave quiet. Which is why the woman currently screaming at my daughter was grinding on my last nerve like a belt sander. Before we see how this power trip ends, I have a question for you. Has anyone ever tried to enforce a fake rule on you or your kids just to feel powerful? Let me know your story in the comments below. If you enjoy stories where bullies get exactly what's coming to them, especially when the police get involved, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. You do not want to miss the look on Karen's face when the real law shows up. So I did what good dads and good cops do. I watched, waited, and let the bully talk. Her name was Karen Truman. Of course it was. She was the self-appointed queen of our quiet little street. A woman who moved in 6 months ago and immediately decided the neighborhood was a fixer-upper. And she was the only one with the tools. She had a voice that could curdle milk and the kind of supreme confidence that only comes from being completely, utterly wrong about everything. She stood there at the bus stop, a clipboard clutched in one hand and a laminated piece of paper in the other, jabbing it toward my daughter's face. In the middle of the paper sat a fat pink QR code. Money always tells the truth. Lucy, bless her heart, was standing her ground, but her shoulders were hunched up to her ears. She's shy, my Lucy, but she's got a spine of steel. She was just waiting for Dad to handle it. "This is a private bus stop," Karen screeched. "Members only. Pay the fee or leave." "Great," I said. "Where do I buy the membership?" "Gift shop? Vending machine?" Karen sniffed. "Fees are collected by an officer." Brad perked up. "That's me, officer." "Badgeless?" I said. "We've met." Lucy tugged my sleeve. "Dad, does members only mean hats?" "Today it means nonsense, kiddo." I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was still hot, a small victory. I looked at Karen. She was wearing a blindingly white tracksuit with the letters HOA embroidered over the pocket, as if it were an official uniform. Flanking her were her two loyal, if dim-witted, disciples, badgeless, Brad and Sticker Rick. Brad was a doughy man in his 40s who looked like he'd lost a fight with a lawnmower, and Rick was a skinny kid who probably still had a curfew. They were trying their best to look intimidating, which was difficult when Brad's tracksuit bottoms were tucked into his socks. "Ma'am," I said, my voice calm and easy, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Karen spun on me, her eyes narrowing. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Morris. I've seen your car. You live on the other side of Willow Creek. That's outside the official HOA boundary. Your daughter has been using this stop illegally for weeks. My house was, in fact, 3 whole streets away, a vast distance. I could barely see it from here. I decided to play dumb. It's a skill I've perfected over the years. People love to explain things to a guy they think is an idiot. They tend to say too much. An HOA? I don't remember getting any paperwork about that when we moved in." "Well, you should have," she snapped. "Ignorance of the bylaws is not an excuse." She shook the laminated paper again. "She can get on the bus today, but only if you pay the non-resident usage fee, $50 per week, retroactive to the beginning of the school year." My brain, the cop part of it, did some quick math. That was a lot of 50s. This wasn't just a power trip anymore. This was a business, a very, very illegal business. Lucy looked at me, her big brown eyes asking the question she was too polite to say out loud. "Are you going to let her talk to me like that?" The dad in me wanted to roar. The chief of police in me knew better. You don't swat a fly with a sledgehammer. You wait, you watch, and you let the fly get comfortable. You let it land right in the middle of your carefully laid trap, and Karen Truman was buzzing right toward it. I gave Lucy a tiny reassuring wink. Game on. "A fee, you say?" I mused, stroking my chin as if I were genuinely considering it. Inside, I logged the crimes and kept my face friendly. "Let the fly land, then close the jar. Do you take credit cards or is it cash only for this official transaction?" Karen puffed up with pride, her trap now fully sprung in her own mind. She pointed a perfectly manicured nail at the QR code. "It's all digital. We are a modern, efficient organization. Scan the code, pay the fine, or your daughter can walk to school." I could feel the eyes of the other parents on me, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They were waiting to see what I would do. What they didn't know was that the real show was just getting started. I kept my face as placid as a pond. Inside, the gears were turning. This was no longer about a neighborhood bully. This was about fraud, trying to take money and harassing a child. A minor, no less. Peace was a lovely goal, but justice was about to make a house call. And I had a feeling Karen Truman wasn't going to like who was knocking on her door. I took another slow sip of my coffee and gave her my most accommodating, slightly confused smile. "Well, I'd hate to break the rules," I said, pulling out my phone. "Let's just see about this fee." Karen's smug grin told me she thought she'd already won. She had no idea that I wasn't just a dad with a phone. I was a cop with a very long memory and a deep abiding love for petty revenge. The first domino was about to fall, and I was going to enjoy the clatter. My smile stayed put, a friendly, harmless mask I wore when I wanted someone to underestimate me. It's my secret weapon. People see a gray-haired guy in a comfortable sweater, and they don't see the 40 years of dealing with crooks, liars and bullies just like Karen Truman. "So," I said, holding up my phone as if I were about to scan her little code, "this HOA, it's new. I must have missed the welcome basket." Karen sniffed, a sound of pure disdain. "The Gravehaven Estates Homeowners Association has been in the planning stages for months. We are simply enforcing bylaws that have been ratified by the steering committee." "Steering committee?" I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. "That sounds very official." I saw Badgeless Brad nod sagely as if he knew what a steering committee was. Sticker Rick was just staring at the clipboard in his hands, probably trying to remember how to spell his own name. That's when another dad, Mark, a quiet guy who worked in IT, stepped forward. He had that look of a man who had finally had enough. "I've lived here for 15 years, he said, his voice steady. "I've never heard of this HOA. I've never been to a meeting. I've never voted on any bylaws." He raised his phone, its camera clearly recording. "So I'd like to state for the record that I believe this is a scam." Karen's face went from smug to furious in a split second. The change was so fast it was almost comical. Her carefully constructed facade of authority crumbled into pure rage. "How dare you!" she shrieked. "You are in violation of Section 12, Paragraph 3, recording an HOA official without consent." She lunged forward and, with a startlingly quick motion, slapped the phone right out of Mark's hand. It was a beautiful slap. The phone flew in a perfect lazy arc, spinning end over end like a tiny silver spaceship before landing with a soft thump in a neighbor's freshly laid mulch bed. Not a scratch. I had to give her points for form. 10 out of 10 for the dramatic effect, 0 out of 10 for common sense. Assaulting someone in front of a dozen witnesses, including a bus full of children, who were now pressing their faces against the windows, was not a winning strategy. Just then, with the timing of a seasoned stage actor, the big yellow school bus hissed to a stop. The door folded open, and Gus, the bus driver, leaned out. Gus was a mountain of a man with a bushy gray beard and a gentle rumble for a voice. He'd been driving this route since I was a rookie. He'd seen it all, and he was impressed by nothing. "Morning, folks," he rumbled, his eyes taking in the scene. Karen looking like a rabid poodle, Mark staring at his phone in the mulch, and Brad and Rick trying to look like they weren't about to bolt. Is this a private party, or is anyone planning on getting an education today? Karen, never one to back down, planted herself in the doorway of the bus, blocking the entrance. She pointed a trembling finger at my daughter. "She is not getting on this bus. She has not paid the non-resident fee." Gus didn't even blink. He slowly, deliberately unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up and the bus seemed to tilt slightly under his weight. He stepped down onto the pavement, each step a heavy final thud. He was at least a foot taller than Karen and about 3 times as wide. He looked down at her, his expression not angry, just tired. "Ma'am?" he said, his voice so low it was almost a growl. "This is Bus 7, property of the county school district on a public road. Rules are simple. No blocking doors, no grabbing kids, no taking money at a stop." He paused, letting his words sink in. He then looked over at Lucy and gave her a warm, grandfatherly smile. "Little lady, you get on this bus." Karen slid a foot in front of the step. "Section 12 says..." Gus raised one eyebrow. "My section says 12, you move." A ripple of snorts ran through the parents. Karen jerked her foot back. "Fine, but I'm writing you up." "Make it legible," Gus said. "Janet frames the good ones." He stepped aside, creating a clear path for her. Lucy, her courage restored, scurried past Karen and up the steps. The other kids followed, a small parade of defiance. Karen was left standing there, sputtering, her authority completely deflated by a man who just wanted to get his route done on time. She was shaking with rage. "This is outrageous. I will be reporting you to your supervisor. I will have your job." Gus just climbed back onto the bus, his face a mask of utter boredom. "You do that, ma'am. My supervisor's name is Janet. She likes donuts. The good kind with the sprinkles." The door hissed shut and the bus pulled away from the curb, leaving Karen standing in a cloud of diesel fumes. As I gathered Lucy's dropped mitten from the ground, Karen turned her fury back on me. Her face was red and a little vein was throbbing in her forehead. "I know who you are, Morris. I see you walking your dog. You think you've won? Yeah, but you haven't. You'll be hearing from my lawyer and you'll be getting a fine for insubordination." I just looked at her. Insubordination. That was a new one. I was apparently insubordinate to a fake HOA that didn't exist. This was getting better and better. I knew then that this wasn't going to end with a simple conversation. This woman was a predator convinced of her own power, and the only way to deal with a predator is to show them that you are much, much higher on the food chain. I walked away without another word, letting her scream at my back. I had work to do, and step 1 was going to be a long chat with my wife, Laura, the smartest person I know. Karen had just picked a fight with the wrong family. She thought she was a wolf, but she just tried to bite a bear. I walked in the back door, the scent of coffee and righteous indignation still clinging to me. Laura was at the kitchen island, her laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed that always amazed me. She didn't look up. "So," she said, her voice laced with amusement, "how was your morning run-in with the Queen of Karens?" "She has disciples now," I said, pouring myself a fresh cup of coffee. "Badgeless Brad and Sticker Rick, they're forming a cult." "I saw in the neighborhood chat," Laura said, finally looking up. Her eyes were sparkling. "She lives for this kind of stuff, while I solve problems with handcuffs and paperwork. She solves them with Wi-Fi and a few well-placed keystrokes. She's a digital ghost, a master of finding the things people try to hide online." Brenda from down the street sent me a picture of the laminated notice. "The QR code is a nice touch, very 21st century grifting." I sat down across from her. "It's a scam, Laura, a real one. She's not just being a busybody. She's extorting money from people." She slapped Mark's phone right out of his hand. Laura's playful expression hardened. "She touched someone." And she threatened Lucy? Yep. Okay, she said, her voice dropping an octave. She's crossed the line. Time to burn it all down. That's my Laura, a lioness in a cardigan. She turned back to her laptop. Let's see where this little rabbit hole goes. She held her phone over the image of the QR code on her screen. A link popped up. She clicked it. The admin link was public, printed on the bottom of Karen's notice. It opened a plain login box. Amateur hour, Laura muttered. Legal? I asked. Public page, public link, Laura said. If she leaves her door wide open, I'm allowed to notice the furniture. What if she used a strong password? She did, Laura said, typing. Strongly silly. Watch. On the screen appeared a website that looked like it had been designed by a middle schooler in 2003. Big clunky text proclaimed, "Welcome to the Grave Haven Estates Compliance Portal." There were blurry stock photos of happy generic families standing in front of identical suburban houses. A single button pulsed in the middle of the screen. Pay your fine. Oh, this is sad, Laura muttered, already clicking away. Opening new tabs, her fingers a blur. Okay, let's see what we've got. Domain was registered 3 months ago. The registration is hidden behind a proxy service based in Panama. Classic move, amateurs. She typed a few more commands, but the website itself is hosted on a cheap domestic server. Sloppy. And the payment processor? Ah, here we go. It's not a real merchant account. It's a simple shell payment service, the kind you use to sell crafts online. All the payments are being funneled directly to a personal account linked to a P.O. box in downtown Grave Haven. She paused, a slow smile spreading across her face. And guess who that P.O. box is registered to? Let me guess, I said, taking a sip of coffee. A K. Truman? Bingo, she said, her smile widening. But that's not even the best part. She navigated to a login page on the website. She tried a few common default passwords. Nothing worked. Then she stopped and thought for a moment. What's the most Karen-like password imaginable? She mused. She typed the default printed on the notice footer, admin. The screen flickered, and suddenly we were in the back end of the website. It was glorious. No way, I breathed. Never underestimate the predictable vanity of a narcissist, Laura said, scrolling through the page. And look at this. The site is so poorly built, she left the transaction logs completely unsecured. On the screen was a long list of names and dollar amounts, dozens of payments, 50 here for a landscaping infraction, 25 there for a holiday decoration violation, 100 for an unapproved paint color. It was a catalog of her reign of terror. She's made thousands of dollars, I said, stunned. Yes, but look at this, Laura said, clicking on another tab labeled reversals. A shorter list appeared. A handful of names, each with a full refund next to it. Here's Stephen Henderson, the lawyer from Elm Street. He paid a fine. Then she refunded him 2 days later. Same with Mrs. Gable, whose son is a state senator. She's a bully, but she's a coward. She preys on people she thinks won't fight back. New families, elderly couples, people who don't want to cause a fuss. Laura was right. Karen was a shark, but she was only brave enough to attack the smallest fish. She was testing the waters, getting bolder with every person who just paid the fine to make her go away. This is everything we need, I said. The financial trail, the victim list. This is a real case. Oh, it gets better, Laura said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. She pointed to a section of the website's code. It was a line of text commented out, meaning it wasn't visible on the live site but was still saved in the file. It looked like a note the developer had left for himself, or in this case, a note Karen had left for herself. It was a list of future ideas for fines, fee for pet being off-leash on private property, surcharge for children's toys left in driveway, fine for excessive barbecue smoke. This wasn't just a scam, it was a business plan. She was building an empire of petty tyranny funded by her neighbors. My quiet, peaceful neighborhood. Laura leaned back in her chair, a look of profound satisfaction on her face. "So, Chief Morris," she said, her voice dripping with mock formality, "now that we have the motive and the means, what's our next move? Are we going to go in loud, or are we going to have a little fun with this?" I looked at the list of victims, at the arrogant notes Karen had left for herself, and I thought of her screaming at my daughter. Peace and quiet could wait. "Laura, my love," I said with a grin, "let's have some fun." The game had just moved to a whole new level, and it was our turn to play. The kitchen transformed into our unofficial command center, my legal pads and pens on one side of the table, Laura's glowing laptop on the other. Old school meets new school. It was a beautiful partnership. "Okay," I said, drawing a clumsy diagram of the bus stop on my pad. "We have the financial evidence, which is great for court. But to get a solid on-the-scene arrest, we need to catch her in the act. We need to prove intent to commit a crime right there on the sidewalk." "You want to set a trap," Laura said, already 3 steps ahead of me. "A sting operation at the bus stop. I love it." "Exactly. We need her to make a demand for money and take a physical action. Threaten a person or their property, something undeniable." I tapped my pen on the pad. "We need bait." "Operation Backpack," Laura said. 2 on the nose, Project Pink Stamp. "Saving that for the finale," she grinned. "Then we call it Bus Stop Blues." "Copy that," I said. "I'll handle rhythm. You play lead." Laura's fingers were already moving. She pulled up the neighborhood chat group. She moderated a digital town square of over 200 families. "I know just the people," she said. "Mark, the guy whose phone she slapped, is already a hero on here. And Maria from 2 streets over. Karen gave her a fine last week because her daughter's sidewalk chalk art was not in a pre-approved color palette. Maria is ready for war." And so the montage began. It felt like something out of a heist movie, if the heist was planned over coffee and involved way more complaining about crabgrass. That afternoon, I met Mark and Maria at a park away from prying eyes. I kept it unofficial. No badge, no uniform, just me, Lucas, their neighbor. I handed each of them a tiny button camera, the kind reporters use, small enough to be invisible on a jacket lapel. "Just act normal," I instructed them, my voice low. "Let her come to you. Ask her simple questions. Can you show me the bylaw in writing? Where does this money go? Keep her talking, and most importantly, keep the cameras pointed at her. If she touches you, if she tries to take anything, don't react. Just let it happen. We need it on video." Mark, his confidence bolstered, nodded grimly. "After she hit my phone, I'm ready." "She's not getting away with this." Maria, a fiery woman who ran a daycare from her home, just smiled. "Oh, I'm going to ask her so many questions she won't know what hit her." Meanwhile, Laura was working her own magic. She designed a fake payment confirmation screen on her computer. It looked exactly like the one from Karen's shoddy website, complete with a confirmation number and a timestamp. But Laura, in her infinite petty genius, made the transaction ID read Anduntar 3 ALHOA. "She emailed the image to me for you to show her," she explained. "Proof that you've paid Lucy's fee. Let's see how she reacts when she can't find the money in her account." My next call was to the school district. I got the head of transportation on the line, a gruff old guy named Sal, who I'd known for years. "Sal, it's Lucas Morris. I need a favor." "Chief," he grunted. "Don't tell me one of my drivers hit another mailbox." "Nothing like that," I said. "I need you to pull the exterior camera footage from Bus 7 Gus's route. Specifically, the stop at Oak and Maple. I need everything from the last week." There was a pause. That's a lot of footage, Lucas. Is this official? Let's call it a public safety. Concerned with the high probability of becoming official tomorrow morning around 8:15 a.m., I said. Sal chuckled. Say no more. I'll have a tech pull it and send a secure link to your email. You take care of whatever problem you've got brewing over there. By evening, all the pieces were in place. I texted Deputy Miller, 8:10 a.m., Oak and Maple. Stand by nearby. Cameras rolling. Laura had briefed a dozen other parents on the chat group. Not about the sting, but just to be present at the bus stop the next morning. A bigger crowd would make Karen feel more powerful, more likely to perform for her audience. It would also give us more witnesses. The button cameras were charged. The bus cam footage was downloading to my secure cloud drive. Laura had even printed out a list of every person Karen had fined, complete with dates and amounts. It was a masterpiece of organized resistance. That night, as I tucked Lucy into bed, she looked up at me. Is that mean lady going to be at the bus stop tomorrow, Daddy? I smoothed her hair back. She might be, sweetie, but you don't have to worry about her. A lot of grown-ups are going to be there to make sure everyone is safe. You just worry about getting on the bus and learning all the things. Okay, she said, her voice small. But you'll be there, right? I will be right there, I promised. I'm not going to let anyone bother you ever. She hugged her stuffed bear and closed her eyes. I stood in her doorway for a long time. The quiet hum of the house, a stark contrast to the storm we were planning to unleash in the morning. This was why I did what I did. It wasn't about the rules or the laws. Not really. It was about this feeling of a child safe in her bed. Karen Truman had tried to take that feeling away, not just from my daughter, but from all the kids she bullied, all the parents she intimidated. She had mistaken quiet for weakness. Tomorrow morning we were going to show her just how loud quiet people can be when you mess with their children. As I went back to the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text from Laura. It just said, "Showtime, big guy. Don't forget your lines." I smiled. I wouldn't. The next morning felt different. The air at the bus stop was thick with a kind of nervous energy, like the moments before a thunderstorm. The usual crowd of parents was there, but today it was double the size. Laura's call to arms on the neighborhood chat had worked. People stood in tight little clumps, sipping coffee from travel mugs, their eyes darting around, waiting. They knew something was about to happen. Mark and Maria were in position, their button cameras discreetly recording. I stood off to the side, just another dad in a fleece vest, trying to look bored. Right on schedule at 8:10 a.m., Karen's pristine white SUV pulled up. She emerged like a general reviewing her troops, dressed in another, even more obnoxious tracksuit. This one was neon pink. With her were her loyal foot soldiers Brad and Rick, and today they had props. My heart did a little leap of joy. This was going to be better than I'd imagined. Badgeless Brad was struggling to carry a heavy, bright yellow wheel boot, the kind parking enforcement uses. He looked miserable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Sticker Rick held a clipboard with an almost religious reverence, and slung over his shoulder was a satchel filled with giant Dayglow orange stickers that read, "Violation" in angry black letters. Karen clapped her hands together, a sharp, commanding sound. "Attention!" she bellowed as if addressing a crowd of thousands. As part of the Gravehaven Estates, HOA's ongoing commitment to community standards, we are conducting a full compliance sweep this morning. All residents will be assessed. There will be zero tolerance for infractions. She scanned the crowd, her eyes landing on Maria's minivan. She marched over to it, Brad and Rick scrambling to keep up. She bent down, squinting at the front tire. "Aha!" she declared triumphantly. "This vehicle is parked 2.5 inches from the curb. The bylaws clearly state a maximum distance of 2 inches. That is a Tier 2 parking violation." She snapped her fingers at Brad. "Brad, boot it." Brad looked at the minivan, then at the heavy boot in his hands, then at the crowd of people watching him. He was sweating profusely. Karen," he stammered.
"Are you sure?"
It's a minivan."
"Do your job, compliance officer," she shrieked with a heavy sigh.
Brad shuffled forward. He tried to attach the boot to the wheel, but he clearly had no idea how it worked. He fumbled with the locking mechanism, grunting with effort. Finally, he lost his grip, and the heavy metal boot fell to the pavement with a loud, reverberating clang. It landed squarely on his own foot. He let out a pained yelp and started hopping around, clutching his toes. It was pure unadulterated slapstick. Undeterred, Karen moved on to her next target. She pointed a finger at a little boy who was proudly holding a brand-new Spider-Man backpack. "You!" she barked. "That backpack is not on the approved color list. Primary colors are only permitted as accents. That is a personal item infraction." She turned to her other minion. "Rick, confiscate the contraband item." Sticker Rick, who looked all of 19 and was pale with fear, took a hesitant step toward the little boy. The boy's father, a large man named Dave, who I knew worked construction, calmly stepped in front of his son, blocking Rick's path. Rick froze, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a very large, very angry truck. This was it. This was the moment. She was escalating from verbal threats to attempted property seizure. The cameras were rolling. The witnesses were watching. I stayed put, letting the scene play out just a little longer. It was important for her to feel completely in control, to dig the hole just a little bit deeper. High on her own perceived power, Karen didn't even notice me. Her eyes scanned the crowd of children looking for her primary target. Her gaze locked onto Lucy. A cruel, triumphant smile spread across her face. She marched toward us, the pink tracksuit a blur of righteous indignation. "And you!" she snarled, pointing at my daughter. "Do not touch my child," I said. Quiet, flat, final. Karen leaned closer anyway. "Rules are rules." I shifted half a step, shoulder between them. "Here's one. You keep your hands to yourself," Rick whispered to Brad. "Is breathing loud a rule?" Brad whispered back, "Probably Tier 3. Lucy instinctively took a small step behind my leg. "I told you yesterday, Morris. This is a private stop for paying members of the community. I don't see your name on my compliance list. The non-resident fee has not been paid." I held up my phone, showing her the fake confirmation screen Laura had made. "Oh, there must be a mistake," I said, my voice dripping with false sincerity. "I paid it this morning. See right here. Transaction ID numéro 3L. She squinted at the phone, her brain struggling to process the gibberish transaction code. Her victory was slipping away, and she couldn't understand why. Her face clouded over with confusion and rage. She was a cornered animal, and cornered animals do stupid things. Perfect. The bait was taken. Time to drop the door. Just as Karen's face began to contort into a mask of pure frustration, a new player entered the arena. Doris, the neighborhood crossing guard, arrived for her morning shift. Doris was a force of nature, in her late 70s. A tiny woman who ruled her intersection. With an iron will and a stop sign she wielded like the hammer of Thor. She wore her neon yellow safety vest over a brightly colored floral dress, a combination that was somehow both ridiculous and deeply intimidating. She took one look at the scene, at Brad hopping on one foot, Rick cowering behind his clipboard, and Karen trying to intimidate a child, and she sighed the weary sigh of a woman who has seen far too much nonsense in her long life. She marched right up to Brad. "Bradley Miller, what in Sam Hill are you doing with that contraption?" she demanded, poking the wheel boot with the edge of her stop sign. "You'll scratch the county's asphalt, and then I'll have to file a report. Your mother, bless her heart, would have a fit if she knew you were out here vandalizing public property." Brad froze mid-hop, his face turning a shade of red that clashed horribly with Karen's tracksuit. Mrs. Henderson," he stammered. It's official HOA business." Doris turned her steely gaze on Karen. "Karen Truman, are you bothering these children again? I swear you have more rules than a convent and less authority than a garden gnome. This is a school crossing. It is for the children. Now, are you going to get out of the way, or do I have to write you a citation for loitering in a designated safety zone?" From a perfectly manicured lawn across the street, two identical heads popped up from behind a row of rose bushes. The Henderson twins, Bob and Bill, middle-aged brothers who shared a house and an unnerving habit of speaking in tandem declarations. They were the neighborhood's Greek chorus. "We're witnessing it!" yelled Bob, holding a pair of pruning shears. "Alibi!" yelled Bill, waving a trowel. It was their standard response to everything from a fender bender to a dog getting loose. They were always available as witnesses, and they always had an alibi. For what? Nobody knew. Adding to the beautiful chaos, my friend Buddy Eli wandered over. Buddy was a big, cheerful guy who ran a popular food truck called the Rolling Scone. He was holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. He handed one to me with a conspiratorial wink. "Morning, Lucas," he said, his voice a low rumble. Then, just loud enough for Karen and her crew to hear, he added, "Looks like the circus is in town early today. Are the clowns union?" Karen was visibly flustered. Her carefully orchestrated compliance sweep was being derailed by a crossing guard, 2 eccentric gardeners, and a scone salesman. The crowd of parents, sensing her weakness, grew bolder. A few people started to chuckle. Her power was built on a foundation of fear and intimidation, and that foundation was cracking right under her feet. She puffed out her chest, trying to regain control of the narrative. "This is official HOA business," she shrieked, her voice cracking with desperation. "All of you are interfering with compliance officers in the performance of their duties. This is a serious offense." She jabbed a shaking finger at Rick, who was still trying to hide behind his clipboard. "Rick the backpack, I gave you an order. Confiscate the contraband now." It was a pivotal moment. She was doubling down, trying to reassert her dominance through her most timid and easily bullied follower. She was forcing a confrontation right in front of everyone. It was exactly what I wanted, but it was happening faster and more chaotically than I had planned. The scene was a beautiful simmering pot of suburban absurdity, and Karen Truman had just cranked the heat all the way to high. Rick looked at the backpack, then at the massive construction worker blocking his path, then at Karen's furious face. He was trapped, and his next move would be the spark that finally lit the fuse on this whole powder keg. Prodded by Karen's screeching, Rick took a deep, shaky breath and made his move. It was a pathetic attempt at authority. He shuffled forward, his hand outstretched, reaching for the little boy's Spider-Man backpack. He looked like a man reaching into a cage to pet a tiger he'd been assured was friendly, but had serious doubts about. The boy's father, Dave, didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just stood there, a human wall, and spoke in a low, calm rumble that was more terrifying than any shout. "Touch my son's property," he said, his eyes locked on Rick's, "and you will be pulling that clipboard out of your ear canal with a pair of pliers." Rick's hand froze in midair. The color drained from his face. He looked at Karen, his eyes pleading for help, for a way out of the situation she had just shoved him into. He was a pawn in her game, and he was about to be sacrificed. Karen, enraged that her enforcer was being so openly defied, decided to take matters into her own hands. She shoved past Rick, her face a mask of fury. "Give me that," she snarled, lunging for the backpack herself. "It's evidence of noncompliance. It will be held in the HOA impound until the fine is paid." Dave reacted with surprising grace for such a big man. He didn't push her. He didn't strike her. He simply moved his body, intercepting her arm, and gently but firmly pushed her hand away from his son. "Don't touch me," he said, his voice still dangerously calm. "And don't touch my son." That was the signal. The dam of polite neighborly restraint broke. The other parents, who had been watching with a mixture of fear and fascination, surged forward. They didn't get violent, but they closed the circle. The space around Karen Brad and Rick shrank until they were standing in a tight, intimidating huddle of angry parents. The button cameras on Mark and Maria's jackets were capturing every glorious second of her meltdown. Brad, seeing the mood of the crowd turn from passive observation to active hostility, decided he'd had enough. He dropped the wheel boot again, this time with a yelp of genuine terror. It clanged on the pavement, a punctuation mark on his failed career as a fake compliance officer. He backed away, holding his hands up as if to say, "I'm not with her." From their porch, the Henderson twins offered their running commentary. "Assault!" yelled Bob, pointing with his shears. "Attempted theft!" hollered Bill. "And we have an alibi!" Karen was cornered, surrounded by the very people she had terrorized for months. Her authority was gone. Her enforcers had abandoned her. She was just a woman in a pink tracksuit, screaming nonsense at a crowd that was no longer afraid of her. But she had one last card to play. Pure, undiluted victimhood. "I'm the victim!" she shrieked, jabbing at her screen. Perfect timing. It was time. The final act. I had let her have all the rope she needed, and she had gleefully, enthusiastically tied her own noose. I stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, my movement slow and deliberate. I put myself between Karen and Dave, creating a small pocket of calm in the middle of the storm. I looked her right in the eye, my face still neutral, my voice still quiet. "Ma'am," I said, as if we were just having a casual chat, "I think that's enough for one morning." Karen spun on me, her eyes wild. The sight of me, the man who had started this whole chain reaction by simply refusing to be bullied, sent her over the edge. "And who do you think you are?" she screamed, her voice raw. "You're nobody. You're just another rule breaker. You're the one who should be arrested." I let a small, tight smile play on my lips. It was a smile I reserved for special occasions. It was my checkmate smile. "Well," I said, letting the suspense hang in the air for a perfect, delicious moment. "As it happens, I have a little bit of experience with that." The show was about to reach its grand finale. I kept that little smile on my face, letting her stew in her own rage. "I'm just a dad," I said, my voice still light and conversational. "A dad who happens to have a few questions for the steering committee." I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch Mark's eye. "Mark, you're our designated cameraman today. Tell me, did you get a clear shot of Mrs. Truman demanding money from me a moment ago?" Mark, his confidence now sky high, tapped the button camera on his jacket. "Crystal clear. Lucas got her demanding the fee, and got a real nice close-up of your phone with a fake payment. A confirmation. It's all in glorious 4K. I then turned to Maria, whose minivan was still unbooted thanks to Brad's incompetence. "And Maria, how about you? Did you happen to record her threatening to illegally immobilize your vehicle on public property without any legal cause or court order?" Maria's grin was positively predatory. "Oh, I got that. And I got her ordering her little goon to try and steal a child's backpack." The audio is pristine. You can hear every unhinged syllable. Karen's face, which had been a furious shade of red, began to pale. The bluster was leaking out of her, replaced by a dawning, horrified confusion. She was a general who had just realized her entire army was made of cardboard cutouts. I pulled out my own phone and held it up. And you know, technology is a wonderful thing. Gus, the bus driver, he sends his regards. He was so concerned about the public disturbance yesterday morning that he saved the exterior camera footage. The school district's high-definition camera got a lovely wide-angle shot of you assaulting. Mark, it's a very compelling piece of video. I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a more serious official tone. I also took the liberty of making a phone call this morning to the Gravehaven County Clerk's office. I had them run a search for any and all registered homeowners, associations within the county limits. And it's the funniest thing. Karen, they have no record of a Gravehaven Estates Homeowners Association. Not now, not ever. It's almost like you just made it all up. I hit speaker. Clerk's office. Can you confirm? Pam answered. Confirmed, Chief. No HOA on file for Oak or Maple Public Roads. She was speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. Her entire fantasy world built on lies and laminated paper had just evaporated. I gestured to the canvas tote bag at her feet, the one overflowing with her official-looking notices and violation forms. And I'm willing to bet my pension that bag is full of forged documents designed to intimidate and defraud the residents of this neighborhood. And I'd also bet that the QR code you're so proud of links to a payment app on your phone, which funnels all that money directly into a personal bank account tied to a P.O. box you rented under your own name. Every fact was a hammer blow, shattering her reality piece by piece. She looked around wildly at the silent, staring faces of her neighbors, at her two enforcers who were now trying to blend in with the scenery. There was no escape? Then right on cue, a Gravehaven County patrol car rolled silently to the curb, its lights off. It was so quiet, so professional. Deputy Miller, a sharp young officer I'd mentored for years, stepped out of the driver's side. He was the picture of calm authority. He surveyed the scene, the crowd, the terrified-looking Rick and Brad, the trembling Karen, and me standing in the middle of it all. He walked over, his boots making a soft, crunching sound on the pavement. He didn't look at Karen. He looked directly at me, and in a voice loud and clear enough for everyone, from Doris the crossing guard to the Henderson twins on their lawn, to hear, he said, "Morning, Chief," Miller called loud enough for every porch. We saw the videos. "Ready when you are." "Copy," I said. "Seize the tote. Log every notice. Photograph the boot." Miller nodded to a second deputy now jogging up the sidewalk. "Brad, Rick, IDs out. Stay put." Buddy Eli cupped his hands. "Also, we're offering refunds in the form of donuts." "Careful," I said. "Those have real authority." The word hung in the air. Heavy and final. "Chief." Karen Truman froze. I could practically see the circuits in her brain shorting out. The friendly dad in the fleece vest, the man she dismissed as a rule breaker. The person she was about to report to the police was the police. The color drained from her face, leaving it a pasty ashen gray. It was the beautiful, exquisite moment of realization when the bully finally understands they've picked a fight with the one person they never, ever should have. It was checkmate. The silence that followed Miller's greeting was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the grass. Every parent, every nosy neighbor, even the Henderson twins stood frozen, processing the revelation. Karen Truman looked like she had been turned to stone. Badgeless Brad looked like he was about to be sick, and Sticker Rick seemed to be actively trying to phase out of existence. I allowed myself a small, deeply satisfying smile. I walked over to Karen's infamous tote bag, the one filled with her weapons of mass intimidation. I reached in and pulled out one of her laminated, official-looking violation notices. I held it up for all to see. "You know, Karen," I said, my voice conversational again, as if I were discussing the weather. "I've been in law enforcement for nearly 40 years. I've seen some pretty creative paperwork in my time. Forged checks, fake IDs, phony deeds. This stuff," I said, flicking the edge of the laminated sheet, "well, it's not that creative. The font choice is a little aggressive, but it is very, very illegal." I reached into the inner pocket of my fleece vest. My fingers closed around the object I had brought from my desk drawer that morning, just for this occasion. It was my favorite office supply. I pulled out a big chunky self-inking stamp with a bright pink ink pad. It was a gag gift from Laura, one I'd never had the chance to use officially until now. I clicked it open with a satisfying thwack. I positioned it carefully over the center of her violation notice and brought it down with firm, decisive pressure. Ka-chunk. I lifted the stamp. There, in big, bubbly, gloriously pink letters was a single word. Void. I stamped 3 in a row. K-chunk. 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 Pink void bloomed like flowers after rain. The crowd exhaled.
This was the part I lived for.
Not the arrest, not the court case, but the small, perfect, petty act of justice that a bully like her would understand on a visceral level. I was nullifying her power, one pink stamp at a time. Deputy Miller, taking his cue, stepped forward. He stood in front of Karen, who was still staring at me in disbelief. "Karen Truman," he said, his voice now all business, the formal tone of an officer making an arrest. "You're under arrest for harassing a child, trying to take money with a fake fine, fraud, and attempted theft. You have the right to stay silent. What you say can be used in court." As Miller gently took her arm to place the handcuffs on her, Karen finally snapped out of her trance. The wailing began. "No, this is a misunderstanding. I'm a community leader." I was just trying to uphold standards. I leaned in close, my voice a conspiratorial whisper only she could hear. "Quick tip for you, Karen, from one community leader to another. Real leaders don't try to shake down 9-year-olds for their lunch money. It's bad for morale." Miller led her to the patrol car, her wails of protest now mixed with sobs of self-pity. As he placed her in the back seat, I called out to him. "Hey, Miller, before you go, hit the siren for me, will you? Just a little bloop bloop. I think the neighborhood deserves a victory song." Miller grinned. He leaned into his car and gave the siren a quick tap. A pathetic little warp sound echoed through the street. It wasn't a scream of emergency. It was a comical chirp of triumph. It was perfect. The moment the patrol car door closed, the crowd erupted. Doris blew her whistle like a confetti cannon. "Clear the crosswalk for justice," Karen shouted from the back seat. But the glass turned it into goldfish mouth mime. Buddy raised a scone. "Free sprinkles for good behavior." Parents laughed, shoulders finally dropping. A wave of cheers and applause swept through the bus stop. Dave, the construction worker, let out a whoop and gave me a slap on the back that nearly sent me into the rose bushes. Mark and Maria were hugging. Doris, the crossing guard, was beaming, holding her stop sign aloft like a trophy. And from across the street, the Henderson twins delivered their final verdict. "Justice!" yelled Bob. "Alibi!" yelled Bill. Through the crowd, I saw Laura approaching. She must have been watching from the end of the street. She walked up to me, a proud, brilliant smile on her face. She didn't say a word. She just slipped her hand into mine and gave it a squeeze. The patrol car pulled away, taking the source of our neighborhood's misery with it. The sun was shining. The kids were safely on their way to school, and my wife was holding my hand. It was a good morning to be the chief of police. The aftermath was as clean and efficient as a well-executed raid, which in a way it was. With Karen in custody, the rest of her flimsy empire collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Badgeless Brad and Sticker Rick were brought in for questioning later that day. They folded faster than cheap lawn chairs. They sang like canaries, telling us everything, claiming they were just following orders and had no idea it was all illegal. We documented them, took statements, and released them pending the DA's call. Likely community service and a lawful security class. I suspect their biggest punishment was having to go home and explain to their mothers why their faces were on the evening news. Laura became the hero of the hour. Working with the district attorney's office, she used the transaction log she'd pulled from Karen's website to create a comprehensive list of victims. The funds in Karen's HOA account were frozen. A judge set a court-supervised refund. Everyone who paid got their money back, plus a short apology letter from the county. It was a beautiful, systematic undoing of all her petty crimes, faced with a mountain of evidence. Multiple high-definition videos, crystal-clear audio recordings, impeccable financial records, and nearly 24 sworn witness statements. Karen's lawyer advised her to take a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to fraud and harassment. She avoided jail time, but she got a hefty fine. A real one this time. 2 years of probation and 200 hours of community service. The sweetest part of the deal for me was the permanent restraining order. Karen Truman was legally barred from coming within 500 feet of Lucy's school or our neighborhood bus stop. The Queen had been officially exiled from her kingdom. A few days later, the change at the bus stop was palpable. The nervous, quiet energy was gone, replaced by a loud, joyful buzz. Parents who had previously just nodded at each other were now chatting and laughing like old friends. The shared experience had bonded them. They had faced down the dragon together and won. One morning, Buddy Eli brought his rolling scone food truck and gave out free coffee and breakfast tacos to everyone. It felt like a block party. Doris the crossing guard held court, telling stories about the great HOA takedown of 23 to the wide-eyed children. I walked Lucy to the stop that morning just like always. But this time, she wasn't clinging to my leg. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She saw her friends and ran ahead laughing, her backpack bouncing. She hopped on the bus, found a seat by the window, and turned to give me a big, brilliant, confident wave. It was the best reward I could have asked for. Laura came and stood beside me. Her arm linked through mine as we watched the bus pull away. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know," she said, a playful tease in her voice, "for a guy whose only goal in life is peace and quiet, you sure are good at starting a ruckus." I grinned, watching the bus disappear around the corner. "Sometimes, my love, the only path to real peace is through a little bit of justice." And I added, "A little bit of well-deserved, publicly administered humiliation." The air was clean. The neighborhood was safe. My daughter was happy. And somewhere across town, a woman who thought she could build a throne out of fear and intimidation was probably picking up trash on the side of a highway, wearing a bright orange vest that clashed horribly with her tracksuits. Peace needs justice. Kids laughing at a safe bus stop? That's both.